In a world where talent is evenly distributed, but venture capital is concentrated in coastal silos, smart startup money is heading for the Midcontinent. Welcome to the Midcon Markup, a podcast that uncovers the inspiring stories of our visionary tech entrepreneurs and the investors who believe in them. I'm your host, Cody Merrill with Cortado Ventures. Listen, learn, and make your Midcon Markup.
Welcome to another episode of the Midcon Markup. Today, we're fortunate to be joined with Kevin Moore, managing partner at Sirac Ventures.
That's right. Thank you for having me.
So, Kevin, can you share with our audience a little bit about your upbringing, educational background, early career experiences that have now led you to being an emerging manager with Fund One with Sirac?
I am from Tulsa, Oklahoma, and actually got my degree in civil engineering and wanted to get into that space for a while, but I was always curious about finance in college. Last year of college, I got my degree, moved out of the state, did some work in the engineering field for a couple of years before wanting to explore what it would be like to work in finance. And ultimately came across private equity, investment banking, venture capital, and wasn't sure which of those verticals I wanted to go down. Ultimately decided on VC, but had no finance experience. So I got my feet wet getting into the financial services industry as a financial advisor. Did that for 6 years before moving into other areas of finance at places like Morgan Stanley, the Federal Reserve Bank. And then when we moved back to Oklahoma, I started at I2E, then I went to a fund of funds and ultimately started Sirac Ventures. But all of that happened over an 18-year period. I always tell people it was not a linear path into venture capital. And if anyone has a very non-traditional path into this space, it was me. Even just from a personal standpoint, I don't come from money. We grew up with insufficient resources. And I like to tell people that sometimes I think there is opportunity on the edges where if you're willing to look in the right places and see things in people that other people don't see, then that's really where you find the big opportunities in venture capital.
In selection of employees for your firm, but also in founders, it seems very important to you that they've had some level of hardship that they've overcome in their life.
It's not a requirement that someone has had hardship because it's a very subjective word. I do think that most people who lack traditional inroads to venture capital tend to experience hardships that other people just don't. And it's those hardships that bring out that grit and that perseverance and that determination in people, which is a trait that we have begun to measure at Sirac Ventures. And it's one of the things that we look for with the founders that we work with. We actually created our own software called Sherpa that helps us to do that. And it's something where the idea for this came from Siracs, if people don't know, stand for, they are massive ice formations that form at the tops of the highest mountains in the world. And for people climb mountains, they're very difficult to overcome. And you need someone to help guide you through that so you can reach the top of the mountain. So our idea is we want to help guide founders to overcome the obstacles that they face when they're growing their business. And for me and for others, there are both personal and professional obstacles. So the name Sirac means a lot to me, but it's not a requirement that people have obstacles or issues or hardships. It's more so a characteristic that we look for that we believe contributes to a founder's ability to overcome challenges when they face them, and they will face them in their business. But I think that every VC has different things that they look for. Ours is just, that's one of them. It's not the determining factor, but it's certainly an important one.
Well, tell us all about Sirac. Everything from the origin story, we already covered the name, but the investment thesis. What's your theory of change?
Thematically, we're looking for companies that expand access to capital and financial services for both individuals and businesses. So broadly, that categorically is like the fintech sector, where we're seeing a lot of banking as a service software. We're seeing a lot of invoicing, factoring, lending products, anything within that fintech vertical. And that stems from my experience working in financial services for 8 years, and also just understanding the power of those tools to change people's lives. Then the other vertical is B2B SaaS, where we're looking for companies that help businesses to be more secure. So maybe cybersecurity technology, or businesses to be more efficient, whether that's workplace technologies. I just got off the phone with a founder who's building an AI tool that helps companies to automate their compliance function, especially in the manufacturing space. Innovative technology, it's a B2B SaaS play, and they're taking what is an antiquated industry and modernizing it with technology. So things like that we see across the board that we're looking for and where we feel like we can add value.
In terms of your progress to date, you guys are Fund 1, correct? Or
raising Fund 1. My anchor investor, she told me, and I met with her this week in New York. She said, Kevin, I just want you to know, year 1 doesn't count. No one knows who you are. You haven't done anything. And I said, I understand that. But the first year of building Sirac Ventures was putting the infrastructure together, finding the people, building the brand, building the messaging, and then sort of catapulting or starting the fund at our first close, which we held in March of this year. And as of today, we've closed on about 30% of the fund, which is fantastic, especially given where we are. And
what are you targeting for Fund 1?
$30 million for Fund 1. We started deploying capital in March of this year. So far, we've invested in 6 companies within those verticals that I described earlier. So things are going really well. Can't complain.
Awesome. And what's your return target?
We think that given our experience as investors and operators and seeing sort of the trajectory of things that we've done in the past by way of, I've been a part of companies that have exited, and I have people on the team who've been operators at really strong companies. Based upon what we've seen and experienced in the past, I think for a seed stage fund, if we invest in 25 or so companies, we think 2 or 3 of them will perform exceptionally well to get us to what people should expect from a seed stage fund, 2.5 to 5x return multiple on the fund. Now, can I guarantee that that'll happen? Absolutely not. But I do know that we can build a portfolio that creates a probability of companies with the right characteristics to give that chance of happening.
Okay, so pre-seed through Series A, and then anything?
Pre-seed and seed primarily.
Pre-seed and seed. Okay, I agree. I think there's more alpha opportunity there.
Yeah.
It's just more interesting, less metrics, more heuristic, more creative skill set.
Right, yeah. And if we can write a $250,000 to $750,000 initial check, we will. But I know that as we raise more capital, our sweet spot will be $500,000 into companies that are raising less than $5 million with a post-money valuation of no greater than $15 million. That's sort of our sweet spot. And one of the dynamics that's changed are stage dynamics, where a seed stage company today is very similar to a Series A stage company was 10 or 15 years ago by way of like valuation, how much they're raising, et cetera. And you can do that across any stages. So when I was looking at what are we going to invest in and where, seed made a lot of sense. Companies have established teams. They're making money, demonstrable revenue, when I say making money, and they have a finished product. I don't think we are as effective with companies where they don't have a finished product or some of those other things that are still in development. So if we can come in where we can find a company that has enough traction to show viability, but they also haven't done so much that they don't need our help. So that's where we spend the majority of our time. And we have a long watch list of really amazing companies that are really close. They just have to do a little bit more before we can really step in and invest in them.
Okay, so circling back to the sectors, you said fintech and then you said B2B SaaS. Within B2B SaaS, do you have a preference for vertical SaaS that's going like very deep for a particular customer profile as opposed to horizontal SaaS which is like a tool like Slack or Airtable that could be used by anybody? And do you feel that there's some sort of regional advantage going vertical?
I think most companies, it is to their advantage to go vertical at first. The evolution of companies as they get bigger is they are often forced to go horizontal just to expand their ability to make more money. Now, that expansion might come by way of in-house creation of new products, or it could come by acquisition of existing companies. One of the things that I look for and we look for in companies is that focus initially, but wanting to understand the bigger vision of what that technology can do. I don't know if that focus means purely technology driven or geographic driven, but given that we can't invest $10 million into a company, what they are doing right now has to produce meaningful traction. And that, for us, is getting that company to that next stage of financing. So our dollars and the dollars of those that we co-invest with, it can't be into something where they say, hey, we're going to do all things for everybody. It has to be, we're going to do X, Y, or Z, or this collection of things to get to this next major milestone such that they can get enough money to do all things for everybody, if that's their end goal.
What advice do you have for founders for overcoming this market size paradox whenever they're first-time founder raising money from venture capitalists? If they're not chasing a huge market opportunity, then nobody looks at them seriously. But the reality is far more nuanced, that usually big successes start by focusing on a very narrow niche. And then, the art is alluding to how big it could get down the line.
Yeah.
But how do founders manage that talking point?
Just like how you did, just like we did. I really think that founders, if they're strategic and methodical with how they are building the company, are going to be that way when they're describing it to an investor. The worst pitch deck I ever saw, and this is sort of an inside joke at Sirac Ventures, was on the market slide. There was a table, a small table, that said target markets, and it listed 9 different markets, and then the last row, it says, and more. And I think that this founder doesn't understand what a target market is. And I think that that's a huge mistake. I don't know what the advice should be, but think about it just from a practical standpoint. If you have limited resources, you can't focus on every single market. Just like as a small, what will be a $30 million fund, we can't invest in Series A, Series B, Series C stage companies, and we can't invest in as many companies as we want. And we have to reserve enough money for follow-on capital, which we really want to do. So at the end of
what is your reserve strategy?
We want to reserve at least 40% of the fund for follow-on investments for our
top
best
decile performers.
Exactly. Yeah. From a modeling perspective, it's no different than what I have to do when I say, hey, if we're raising 30 million, we have X amount for management fees, X amount for follow-on capital, X amount that we know we're probably going to lose, yada, yada, yada. And here's how much we have to deploy. How are we going to do that? So companies should do the same thing. If you're raising $2 million, that gives you how much runway and what are the milestones that you need to hit. So it makes total sense to explain your rationale for what you mean to accomplish with the resources that you have. Therefore, as an investor, I know that you can't totally dominate this massive market because you don't have enough resources to do that. Show me the small steps that you're going to take to get there, but help me understand that you're trying to get to the top of the mountain that's way over there, but show me the incremental step that you're taking now to show progress.
Speaking again to first-time founders and misconceptions they have, do you see more founders oversell, undersell, or strike the perfect tone? And what's the bigger fear? How should founders think about their voice and balancing optimism with truthfulness so that they can maintain a trustworthy relationship throughout the diligence process with the VC?
I said to this founder today, I said, hey, before we get started, just break it down simple for me and tell me what is the problem that you're solving. And he did that in 2 or 3 sentences. And the simplicity of it all, to me, makes the most sense. Keeping it super authentic. The majority of founders do not do that. They're overselling. I'm like, you don't have to do that. We talk to a lot of founders on a regular basis. And when a founder has something, they know it. And to the degree to which they know it, in my opinion, means that they can explain it in fewer words than more. The opposite are founders that I talk to where they haven't figured it out and they're searching for an answer, and sometimes in front of me, which doesn't bode well in the long term or in the short term for them. But I would say most people oversell and it's not necessary. But I do think that this industry is moving back toward one of authenticity, which is great for me. I like to see that because it stands out. But it's also taught me that as I've built Sirac Ventures and we're building it, just being authentic with the investors that we talk to seems to resonate more than a bunch of things that we could share with them, but that don't really matter that much.
What are some of these overselling behaviors that founders engage in that turn venture investors off?
Talking about all the things that the product can do, or all these markets, or they're having all these conversations with potential buyers, these grandiose plans for all these different things, versus just coming to us and say, hey, here's the problem that we see, but here are the problems that we're experiencing trying to do that. We need capital, and we need more than just capital. We need someone to help guide us toward some of the things that we're trying to overcome. But it's a wide variety of things. I think that there are some founders who they might have success raising capital very quickly. And because of that, they get into this idea that it's always going to be like that. But it takes like 10 years to build a company that's going to achieve something meaningful. So the founders that are more grounded in understanding that know that they can't get too high on their highs, nor can they get too low on their lows. They have to sort of figure things out in real time and make adjustments in real time. You can recognize that maturity in a founder really quick just by the things they say about the competitive environment. I hate when people say there's no competitive environment. I'm like, what are you talking about? If you didn't have any competition, you wouldn't know what to build. Competition is good. And just because a market is really big and there are a lot of competitors, that also doesn't mean that you can't step in and compete. I've had a lot of founders, the good ones, talk to me just like I'm talking to you about that. It's like, yeah, there are these competitors here, but this market is growing so fast and it's so big, we have an opportunity to do X, Y, or Z.
What do the best founders know about their problem that differentiates them from your average founder?
It's not so much what they know, it's about what they can do. The best sort of CEOs that I've seen at the seed stage are those who are able to develop the product or able to sell the product. And what I mean by that is I talk to the majority of founders who recognize a problem, but they never worked in the problem that they're trying to solve, nor do they have the expertise to actually build the technology to make a solution. Most of the founders that we've invested in so far, I can think of pretty much every single one of them, they have both, where they have this direct experience with this issue and they have the technical chops. I do think that more importantly is the experience with the actual problem, and then taking a step back to see that that problem is actually big enough such that they should build a company around it.
Because solutions can change and they likely will evolve over time. But if the founder's not obsessed with the problem, if they're not an expert on the problem, is it just really hard to have any conviction that they're going to hit a bullseye with a dart?
Yeah, and again, I'm not saying that doesn't happen. However, I think that given the limited amount of resources that most founders have in this competitive fundraising environment, they have to have that conviction to really power through when maybe they're payroll's getting short, or they have to cut back on different things in their personal lives. But if they're just passionate and convicted that this is a big enough problem to pursue, there's usually some experiential evidence that they have with it.
Looking backwards at investments you've made throughout your career, it doesn't even have to be this particular role, but you've had an initial meeting with the founder, and then you've later made an investment, and then it's either turned out good or it's turned out poorly. How accurate were your first assessments of the individuals? Have you gotten better at reading people quickly? Or is it you have a general idea, okay, this person's competent, but you don't really know what the big winners are?
My biggest learning from all the investments that I've personally ever made is the problems that a founder is working on will change. Their team might change, their technology might change, the market might change, but the one thing that you cannot change is the founder. And if made any mistakes in the past, it's been not spending enough time to understand who the founder was. So now, even if we really love a company or a vertical and a company has tremendous traction, we will never be rushed to make a decision to invest in any company without spending a meaningful amount of time with the founder. And this happens quite a bit, where there was a company just killing it on revenue and they were oversubscribed, all these different things. And we met with them and they were saying, we'll let you in, but you have to let us know by next week. And we had a 30-minute meeting with this founder. So we're like, hey, we love what you're doing, but we're going to pass. And I think that what we're building at Sirac Ventures, so much of this is about the founder. And there are some founders in the past, I'm not going to say who, that Weave and I have invested in, not so much because we love the underlying vertical of what they're building, but because we believe so much in this founder's ability that it was worth making that investment, because they demonstrate the characteristics of if you need to pivot, if you need to change, if you need to hire, if you need to sell, if you need to develop something new, you can do that.
How much of that were you able to discern just from like first pass, first impression, versus you had to spend a considerable amount of time with them and then you picked up all of these additional data points that then informed your investment decision? And how do you get to know founders, right? Because it's not a natural exchange. You have somebody who wants money and then you have money. Of course, they're going to put on their best. You know, they're going to look their best. Their deck is going to be polished. They're going to say the right things. How do you see through that to the character?
I would say that the times whenever you do see through to a character with a founder in a first call, it probably happens about, for me, 2% of the time.
Okay.
So not very often. The ways that you do that mechanically from a due diligence standpoint is having multiple people on the team spend time with that founder. We constructed what we call the Sirac Ventures Guild, or as a panel of independent experts that work with us in evaluating portfolio companies. We have that founder present to the guild, want to meet with every single founder in person, talk to their team, talk to their customers, and to the degree that they can be consistent and put on their best face. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, because they're going to have to do that with their customers anyway. We all kind of have to be ambidextrous in this business in our ability to relate and work with different types of people, as well as sometimes you kind of have to be a chameleon and take on a face to do things that aren't immoral, but to do things where you just have to be flexible. And when you're building a company, I want to see that founders are able to do that. So I want to see their best face every single time, but also want them to be willing to be vulnerable at the same time.
Right. They have to know when and where to show that vulnerability.
Yeah, I think smart people know when and where to do that.
What about artificial intelligence? It's transforming society in just about every way. If a startup doesn't have AI associated with it, then in about 5 minutes they're going to. What are your general thoughts? The investment opportunity, regulation, what are your thoughts on AI?
I'll give you my thoughts on AI at the high level and then at the macro, and then we can talk about it on the micro. I do think that on the macro, artificial intelligence is a tool, just like any other technology tool there has been, whether it's computers or cell phones or refrigeration, whatever it might be. It's just another tool that enables us to do different things. Now, it is a tool that is transformative in nature, in that our society and the way that jobs are staffed and how technology operates will change. The degree to which that happens from a speed standpoint, I'm not sure. Things have to catch up. AI can do what it does, but compute power is still really slow, relatively speaking. AI can do what it does, but as far as the application side of AI, we haven't really seen that yet. There will be industries that are wildly transformed by it: healthcare, education, customer service, law, heck, even venture capital maybe. So that's what I think about AI at the high level. I think the hysteria around AI as a negative influence on our economy is a little overblown, because we've had other technologies in the past that have been transformative and humankind adjusted. That being said, startup founders are going to use technology to help advance whatever problem they're trying to solve. To some problems, AI is useful, and to some others, it's not. But to your point, everyone sort of talks about that. I even brought this up with this founder I talked to today. I said, there's a concern by me and other investors that I talk to that AI will be so ubiquitous across the ecosystem that it's no longer a competitive advantage. And what is your response to that? I 100% agree. We are going vertically deep into an area that we are experts in, and we're utilizing AI to help us do that. But we don't expect that to help us maintain a competitive advantage. We expect our sort of vertical depth and knowledge into this particular problem to maintain our competitive advantage. And that's how I feel about it. AI is just like the internet. When the internet first came out in 1990, early 1990s, people laughed at it and look at what it has done now. AI is, to me, that transformative, or maybe even more. Those are my thoughts. I could be wrong. Quite frankly, I don't really care that much. The core things I care about are, is this company solving a problem? How are they doing that? And is there a long-term opportunity for this thing to grow? Oh, okay. Oh, and they're using AI to help make that happen. That's just a secondary thought to me.
What do you think about the social consequences of AI? So it's inevitable that there's going to be a lot of workplace displacement. Yes, some new jobs are going to be created. It's questionable if it's as many that will be destroyed, but a lot of these new jobs are going to require different skills and are going to be in different locations from the jobs that were destroyed.
I don't probably agree with sort of this hoopla around celebrating the idea that people are going to lose jobs because of AI. Like, why in your right mind would you think that's a good thing? I don't. I also think that, and this is probably the only thing I don't like about venture capital, and I am a VC, is that we should be trying to create technologies that make the world better, right? And oftentimes there seems to be this culture within our industry of trying to make things better so fast that we don't understand the negative impact that can have on society. And I'm a big believer that if we're going to create technology and utilize tools, it shouldn't be to the detriment of humankind. That being said, this is nothing new. This has been happening for millennia, ever since mankind has been on this earth. So it's this weird catch-22 where you want technology advancement, but you want to do it in a way that's responsible and beneficial to humankind.
Some experts say that, hey, in the United States, we should throttle down our development of artificial general intelligence because we don't know what these unintended consequences are going to be. We need to give society time to ramp up, to prepare for the transformation. But on the other side of that, it's not like you're going to be able to get China to slow down their development of AI, right? This is also a geopolitical technology arms race. So it's not like we're operating in a vacuum in the United States and that there's not consequences for throttling down.
Agreed. I think that we should be full speed ahead, but we should also put in place the mechanisms to make sure that our society is trained from a skills standpoint to utilize the technology to empower ourselves, not to utilize the technology to displace hundreds of thousands or millions of jobs, because then what does that do for our economy? That further creates massive divides where there's already complaints by people on both sides that the wealth gap in our country is really big and has only widened, especially for certain socioeconomic groups. And unskilled labor, we're at a shortage with unskilled labor, but our society has moved away from one that even requires as much unskilled labor and more to like a consultative society. So if you're not training and upskilling people, but you're creating an economy where you need massive amounts of skilled people in order to maintain your society, then there's a mismatch there. So I do think that we'll get that right, but it doesn't always move in lockstep with one another. That has been most of the research that I've read, is AI is coming, how are existing companies reskilling or upskilling their workforces to be prepared for that? And to me, that's the responsible way to adopt a new technology, whatever it is. It's kind of like when Microsoft introduced Microsoft Office. That was like a big change in workplaces. And I only brought that up because I was watching The Office on my plane ride back from New York. And Michael Scott didn't want the office to use PowerPoint because it was like new technology and all the old people thought they were going to lose their jobs. But it was a hilarious episode. But the whole point of it was it's new technology potentially coming in to disrupt an existing workplace. And AI is just no different. We just got to get used to it.
Are you a proponent of universal basic income? Do you think that that is an inevitability? Or maybe universal public employment? I mean, there's a family of ideas to help address the social consequences of mass displacement. What are your thoughts there?
I said to my son, he was asking me about Medicare and Medicaid. And I said, the U.S. government set this up for people to have health care. And there are certain requirements for people who apply for it. I only mention that to you, Cody, because our society already has stuff set up to help people at certain levels to have the basic things that they need. Now, I know you're aware of the sociological study or whatever that was done in Stockton, California around universal basic income. And that study demonstrated the data that the results were just amazing. Am I a proponent of it or not? I don't know. I feel like the cultural dynamics of America would not permit it. However, if there are use cases where it is effective, then great, let's do it. But will it be effective everywhere? I don't know.
Talk a little bit about the regional focus of SROC. Is that essential for your investment thesis? And then why are you located here? You could relocate to one of the major areas, San Francisco, Seattle, New York. But what about the Midcon region is appealing for you to establish your firm and build roots?
Whenever I think about asymmetry, I think about it from an investment standpoint. I think about wanting to invest where other people are not investing. That's really where the alpha is on the edges. However, the portfolio manager side of me also understands that you have to have geographic diversification and diversification in general in order to build an optimal portfolio. I've been doing that for years and understand that full well. So for us, the Midcon is about 30% of where we'll focus, and we have some stuff on the West Coast and some stuff on the East Coast. But as a newer firm, for the opportunity to build in a growing market I'm originally from Oklahoma, not Oklahoma City, which is where I live now. And there's just been a huge paradigm shift in anyone's ability to build something wherever they are. And we live in such a global and mobile world that I spend time in 4 markets here: Southern California, Chicago, where I used to live, and in the Northeast, New York area. I mean, my anchor investor is in New York City, but I'm an Oklahoma City headquartered venture capital firm. So I think we are on the ground and we see a lot of opportunities here first, or definitely before any of our peers on the coast. But at the same time, the extent of our networks extend to these other markets such that if we invest in a company here, we can market those companies to firms that we have relationships with in other places, and vice versa. If there's a company in another area that we want exposure to, it's easier for us to get to all these places and get into those deals as well. I think that I was on the phone today with a family office in Philadelphia, and he asked me the same question you're asking. He was like, "Why are you in Oklahoma?" And I said, "Well, in this new environment, it doesn't really matter where we are." And he said, we used to have this big focus on geography, but so many of our VCs were moving all over the country that we had to abandon that strategy because it just didn't really matter anymore. So to be here in the middle of the country where we have a phenomenal quality of life, there's this burgeoning group of hungry founders that are coming up through the ecosystem. Like, I legitimately can't justify a reason to be somewhere else. And really, I can't justify a reason to be anywhere. I'm from Oklahoma. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So why wouldn't I be here?
So you'd say that the geographic arbitrage talking point has been resonating with the coastal family offices you've been speaking with?
Absolutely. In fact, my anchor investor told me that the reason they backed me was because I was in Oklahoma. And it was just so different that they had to have it in their portfolio.
And I mean, just from a value standpoint, right off the bat, there's a completely different valuation universe in
absolutely.
the Bay Area versus Oklahoma. So you're taking a big haircut on your returns the second that the ink is dry. Absolutely. If you're investing in the Bay. We monitor and analyze our inbound deal flow. The companies raising money in this part of the country, the round sizes and the valuations were about 20 to 30% lower than some of these places around, I would say in particular the Bay Area. Now, I don't think there's anything wrong with the Bay Area. I don't think there's anything wrong with anywhere, but I do think that from a portfolio management standpoint, if you're not open to looking at opportunities in other places, then to me, you're really doing a disservice to your investors, because it just doesn't make sense whenever you know that the barriers to entry to start a company are way lower than they used to be. Technology has widened the aperture for the amount of opportunities that are out there. Not only that, there's proof that founders who have access to less resources are able to do a lot more with less. Now, will those companies need additional downstream capital and all those different things? Absolutely. So I think those are the things that we bring to the table at our firm, is we do have a strong network. And there are a number of other VC firms within this region who also have strong networks. So the United States is flattening. And I do think that other investors are starting to look in our region for those opportunities. And similar to AI, will we have this advantage forever? Maybe not. What advice do you have for other emerging managers launching Fund 1? There's an enormous mountain of knowledge that you don't have that you need to have, but eventually you figure it out and you learn a lot of lessons the hard way. How would you advise somebody on step 1?
I think about this question a lot because I talk to a lot of newer managers. And again, Sirac Ventures is my first fund, but I'm not a new manager. I've been doing this for many years. What I've learned is a firm has 4 components: fundraising, marketing, operations, and dealing with founder work. The degree to which you're spending time on any one of those verticals changes based upon where you are in the life cycle of your fund. So for Sirac Ventures, I'm spending a lot of my time on fundraising because that's what we're doing. However, that does not mean I'm not doing those other 3 things on a daily basis. I'm just doing more or less of them depending on the season. Summertime is usually slow, so I have more time to spend on some of those other things. And the mistake I see some emerging managers make is they are lopsided in where they're spending their time and energy. When they need to be spending time on fundraising, they may be spending it on working with founders way too much. Or
fundraising's hard.
Yeah, it's hard.
It's very tempting to allocate your time elsewhere.
Right, but I think it takes a maturity and understanding of those 4 verticals and bifurcating your day between income generating activities and non-income generating activities, where like I rarely do any operations stuff during the week, and I reserve that for the evenings or the weekends. And I have dedicated time on my calendar for when I'll talk to founders. I have dedicated time on my calendar for when I'll meet with my team. But I structure the day based upon the needs of the firm. And I actually really don't think newer managers are good at doing that. And it might be because they think they need to do all these different things to attract LPs, but sophisticated investors are going to understand if you're not just an investor, but if you're someone who knows how to run a company. And to me, many newer managers do not know how to run a company, which...
That's its own problem.
That's another problem, because running a fund is not just investing in companies. You actually have to run a company and understand where you need to use your time.
Whenever you're selling your vision to potential LPs, how do you differentiate your value proposition compared with other regional Midcon fund managers?
We spend a lot of time thinking about how do we translate our experience into working with founders and creating an environment for them to achieve long-term success. That's why we created the Sirac Ventures Guild. That's why the team is comprised of both investors and operators. That's why we've built our own proprietary software to track things about founders that we know and like. That's why we spend time in the ecosystems where we're actively trying to recruit founders. We also are extremely transparent with our investors and bring them into what we're doing. But all that being said, the unique thing about our firm are the people. And I have a long personal story that I share with investors about why I'm someone they should back, and my personal grit story and determination and all those different things, because I've learned that, kind of like what I said about founders, I can change the strategy of my firm. I can change our investment focus, and I can change the team. I can do all these different things, but the one thing that I cannot change is myself. So when I talk to LPs, it's less about our strategy and more the firm. It's more so about, let me tell you why I'm someone that you want to back. I spend the majority of my time talking about that versus our strategy, because people have so many options these days. The options to invest in something so specific, like a Bitcoin fund focusing on clean tech, and like it could be so absurd, but it's like that is out there. But the one thing that I've learned is people are really buying into the people. So most of those meetings are spent talking about our why. Like, why are we doing what we're doing? Why do we have this passion and conviction for building what we're doing and going through all the difficulties of raising a firm? And then once they buy into the why, then everything else is just mechanical. And early in my career, I would say even early in the fundraise for this fund, I made that mistake of focusing too much on the mechanics and more and less on the why behind what we were doing.
It's like a founder saying, my product does this, it does that, and it can do this.
Right. Yeah. And I think that, again, you get into these situations where you feel like, oh, I got to do that to impress these people, but they don't want to be impressed. Just tell them the truth about what's like your why for what you're doing. That seems to resonate a lot more.
I'm not sure where I heard it, but like a good litmus test is you want to be comfortable enough in conversation with somebody that they wouldn't fear sitting on an airplane with you for 3 or 4 hours. And so there's something that you have always been, I guess, ever since I've known you, been very strong in is you just have this like very pleasant disposition. You're open, you're receptive, you listen. Has that come naturally for you? Have you had to learn how to do that better?
It comes from a place of humility, knowing that I don't know everything, and also believing that there's something I can learn from everybody, whether it's someone who cuts my yard, someone who works above or below me. I don't care. I just think that there's a uniqueness about every single person, and that curiosity of wanting to know why, that helps with conversation. I don't know. I think that I spent a lot of time alone when I was a kid. My parents divorced when I was really young. My brother and I were alone a lot. So this idea of wanting to learn about other people and just that curiosity stems from those experiences. I think it just carried over as an adult. And I appreciate you saying that. I don't look at it as special. I just look at it as like we all should be curious about things. And I think that the best founders and the best investors and the most interesting people, they generally have that in common. They're very curious. So for me, that venture is like this amazing career because you're learning and meeting so many new people and things all the time. It's just like it's a very satisfying job to do.
Yeah, I mean, founders are incredibly inspiring. They have this thesis of change that they're putting their life on hold to act on, and you have an opportunity to support them.
Yeah, it's a very rewarding position to be in. And anyone who does it, there's obviously you want to generate a return for your investments, for your investors. They know that. There's a human side of this job that's very palpable that I enjoy, that most of us enjoy.
Well, it's cool seeing your connection with the mission, the experience, the fulfillment, all aligning. And it's just really cool seeing what you've been able to get off the ground with Ciroc. Last question. Where do you see Ciroc in 10 years?
I want this firm to be one that represents the next era of what a venture capital firm not only looks like, but is doing. If we can demonstrate to the market that you don't have to have this perfect background to build something great. You don't have to be in the perfect place to do that. If we can help to reshape the photo or the texture of this industry, then I think that we've done our job well. And that's going to take some time. And there's been progress made, but there's been regression as well. So if we can do that, then we're doing our job.
Well, phenomenal, Kevin. Can't wait to see what you continue to build with Ciroc, and just really appreciative for what you're doing for my home state.
Awesome. Thank you for having me.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Midcon Markup. Please hit like and subscribe for more episodes.